Hello and welcome back to Ri3D at Purdue. So at some point I'm sure you'll hear from the other three prototyping groups, but here is what our group kind of sat and talked about. So we did see a lot of people comparing this to the 2017 game, looking at poofs or robonauts or stuff like that, but we also saw a lot of similarities to the power cells in 2020, and so we went and looked at, I believe it was Grand from 2910 Jack in the Bot. The big thing is this robot could currently hold about 5 fuel, had what would essentially be the same as a low climb, as well as it was already within the new frame perimeter limit and all of that fun stuff. So our goal is to try and make sure that we can get an over the bumper, if not through the bumper intake, to work really well at centering and storing the fuel. And just kind of seeing how small we can get that, which is why we're looking at this kind of hummingbird class as we've seen in FRC form of teams like this or Orbit and some of their more smaller years.
So for our ideas, we mainly focused on the intake and hopper, which can kind of be an integrated system. So in this game, you can hold as many game pieces as you want. So we wanted to hold as many game pieces as we could. And to do that, this takes inspiration from some other teams, like during Steamworks, especially because there were so many game pieces. So what you can do potentially is you can actually have an expanding hopper. So when the game begins, you have to start in your starting configuration. And then after auto starts, you can actually deploy it. So you have some sort of like bucket that can pivot out, and then it increases your capacity by this much. And then you can have your intake roller on the outside of that bucket on the bottom. So you have a little gap so you can funnel in as many fuel as you want. You can also have it slide out to have a more uniform motion. You can do a rack and pinion. You can do linear actuation if you use pneumatics. We usually don't, so we would have to do something more along the lines of a rack and pinion. So once the fuel would be in the robot, you would want to have some sort of way to shuffle them through the robot. So that's where the hopper comes in. You would probably have a belt along the bottom or snaking through the robot if you wanted that. For the intake, you could do just one roller, but we are finding that the fuel are really slick against bumpers. So you would probably want some sort of intake that deploys down over the bumper so that you can have 2 points of contact to feed the fuel up into your robot. Now, for the shooter, there are a few things you can do. To control the spin on it, you can do 2 flywheels like this, so the fuel goes in between them and launches. You would have to tune the speed of those to figure out how far your fuel is going to go and how far back your robot can sit. You can also do a hooded shooter, which essentially has the same type of output, so you can control the angle to control how far it goes and control the speed of the flywheel. We found that it's simpler to prototype with the 2 flywheels, since making a hood requires some sort of rack and pinion on the back. As an alternative, if you wanted to test out some crazier ideas, you could do a long roller for your shooter and shoot maybe 3 fuel at once. This is a bit more experimental because then you can't predict or aim as well where the fuel is actually going to go. But if you got it tuned, you could potentially have more fuel per cycle because every cycle outputs 3 as opposed to shooting 1 at a time.
All right, so our prototyping group really focused on our hopper extension idea that we talked about, basically sliding the hopper out over our intake mechanism and keeping it there to extend our capacity to get as high as physically possible. Basically, we looked at doing a parallel linkage intake that is roughly attached to the hopper extension, so when we extend the intake for the first time, it will pull the hopper extension out, but it is slotted so that it will only pull it out and it won't actually be able to push it in. That way we can keep the capacity while keeping the intake in and keeping it away from damage. After we get the fuel into our hopper, we basically planned on just gravity feeding it down into our shooter and indexer mechanism, which will bring the fuel up into our shooter. We talked about both a adjustable hooded shooter and a set of static 2 rollers to look at that. We elected that the 2 static rollers would give programming less hassle and be able to let them work quicker while being just as accurate and easy to use as the adjustable hooded shooter.
The group looked at Steamworks primarily for inspiration, with the similarity of a lot of small balls around the field, to this year's game with a lot of small balls around the center of the field area. One team we looked at from the Steamworks season was Team 254, they had a very large hopper that expanded outwards as they deployed their intake, and their intake just fed into the entirety of the bottom of their hopper, and so they didn't even need it narrowed or anything to get it through one small hole or even index it like that. You only index it when going to the shooter, which is one idea we liked. Additionally, we thought of an idea with a split bumper, because those are now legal again this season, where the with split bumper design would have a lower acquisition area, but we were thinking of adding a mechanism wheels which flip down in front of the bumper to roll the balls against the bumper and then into the center of the split bumper intake to actually increase our acquisition area and not give us the downside of a lower acquisition area of just the center of that split bumper area.
We are working on the climber subsystem of our robot, and we're looking at potentially making a level 3 climber. So in order to do that, we have come up with a few different ideas, where our main idea stems from having a static climber and a climber in a box type of climber, where it will extend up to grab your level 1 bar, and just it'll go up, grab that, and your stationary will then grab that level 1, so your next level can extend up. But a huge issue we have is that the rungs will actually go inside of the robot. So we are planning on adding a ramp that will push the poles outside of our robot to stay in frame. That's been the main idea that we're thinking about going with forward. We've come up with a few some crazy ideas, like flipping our robot upside down to make our bumpers go above, or trying to climb on the side, but we'll see how that goes.